All right, so in that case, without further ado, let me introduce you to a wonderful friend of mine and a wonderful speaker, Barbara Bartolome, who's going to tell us about her near-death experience and everything that has ensued as a result. Take it away.
Hello, everyone, and hello from Santa Barbara, California. So there's a lot here. First, I'll give a little bit about my background, and then I'll talk about my second near-death experience. And so my background is that I was raised in Salem, Oregon, and I moved here to Santa Barbara about 36 years ago. And when I moved here, it was at the request of someone who asked me to marry them. And they had a house here in Santa Barbara. In my growing up years, my mom was a police officer from my teen years on, and she outshot 90% of the men on the police force. She was a reckoning force in Salem, Oregon. And she also had a good heart, and I had a great dad who worked for the state of Oregon, and I had 4 siblings. And in my early years, I went to college, and then I also did a lot of different positions and jobs that I enjoyed doing, and I've really loved all my aspects of my work career. I'm retired now from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and I also had a store here in Santa Barbara that I'll tell you a little bit about later. And so when I was about 29 years old, I met someone and they up in Oregon, and after dating for quite a 6-month, 8-month period, where they were going to move back down here to Santa Barbara, where they owned a home, and they invited me to move and to marry down here. Well, I was in love, and I thought that was a great idea. I had been married when I was 21 years old to a college friend of mine, and actually we went to high school together and some college. And that had not worked out. He had not wanted to grow up, and he didn't want to work, and I bought a home, and I couldn't pay my mortgage unless he worked. And so we ended up separating, and we had a son, and I have that oldest son is now 42 years old. So I moved down here and got married and began working in the Santa Barbara area. And pretty soon after the marriage, I started recognizing a lot of issues with the husband. And he kind of hid them before we were married. And then after the marriage, I think he kind of felt like he had me. And so things started erupting. And at first I just, tried to talk and say, please don't do this. Don't hit me. Don't push me. Don't do all these things that you're doing. Don't explode. Calm down. Things just didn't calm down. It got worse and worse. And so I left him for a year, and I moved away with my son to another location in Santa Barbara. And I told him that he needed to have counseling, and he needed to get that straightened out, because it was a childhood thing that had happened with his father that had caused the situation to be as abrupt as it was. And so it didn't, and the year went by. He guaranteed me that he'd gone through his counseling, and he hadn't. And I moved back in on his word that he'd changed, and he hadn't. And so here I was, kind of trapped again, and feeling as though I'd made a bigger mistake the second time around. And I had always known in my heart that there was another child that was waiting for me. And I knew there was a daughter that wanted to come into my life. And I don't know why I felt that. I just knew it in my heart. And I ended up getting pregnant. And so we were going to have a child together, and it was pretty traumatic for the pregnancy. He still didn't calm down, and there were lots of medical problems because of what he was doing. So the baby was born in July of 1987, and about a month after her birth, little redheaded, beautiful strawberry blonde little girl, the little girl that I knew, I mean, I just knew her before she even came into my, physical world. And about a month later, he called me out onto the patio and he told me to come over to where he was. And he ended up lowering a 2x4 that was shoved underneath 5 bags of dry cement. And then he removed his shoulder really quickly, and the weight of the cement came down on the 2x4 on my shoulder, and it blew out the disc in my lower back. And I crumpled to the ground, screamed probably as loud as I possibly could have, probably heard me in China. And I ended up going to a doctor. I started not being able to walk. It was a ruptured disc in my lower back, and sciatica had resulted from it. And I got to the point where I couldn't walk anymore. So the doctor ended up telling me that first doctor that I went to, that I would never walk again, that he couldn't fix it, that it was, unfixable, and that I was in trouble. So I went to another doctor, a neurosurgeon, at the request of some of my friends. And he said, I can fix this. So I believed him, and I wanted to be fixed. I was 31 years old with now a 5-month-old baby daughter. I wanted it to be fixed. And my son was about 8 years old at that time. So what ended up happening was that he got me into the hospital that the surgery was going to be at the next morning. He had me come in the day before, and he was going to have a myelogram done, where they inject iodine dye into the back of your neck back here, and they just numb with the local, and then they have you on an x-ray table, and they tip the x-ray table so that your head is up and your feet are down, and the dye with gravity goes down your spine. So the doctor, neurosurgeon, was in the room, 2 x-ray techs, a nurse, and also an orthopedic surgeon that he had brought on board for the surgery the next morning. And I'm assuming that both the doctors were there because it was so close to the surgical time the next morning that maybe they thought they wouldn't get the results from the test, or I'm not sure exactly why they were present, but it was really lucky that they were. So they injected the dye in, they started tipping the table. And I immediately started feeling really funny. And they told me, don't talk at all, don't move, don't do anything while this is happening, because if you do move or anything, you can have headaches for months afterwards. So I was laying on the table, and they were moving it, and it was slowly going this, and it was kind of, moving really slowly. And I was feeling like, oh my gosh, something is definitely wrong. But the 2 x-ray techs were talking to each other about personal items, and the 2 doctors were leaning against the wall on the far side of the room, and they weren't really paying attention because, it's going to take a while for the x-ray machine to tip me to the point where the dye was going to be at the level that it needed to see my spinal cord, because they were worried that the spinal cord had been ruptured, had been clipped by one of the pieces of the disc when it blew out, and that might be part of the problem, and they might need to fix it the next day by surgically sewing up the spinal cord, I guess. I have no idea. Anyway, they were all just kind of looking around at other stuff, and I was feeling very bizarre, like, oh no, there's something wrong here. But I didn't speak out until it was too late. And when I finally realized that I needed to tell them, I could think still, but I couldn't speak. My mouth wouldn't open to talk, and I couldn't move my hand to touch the guy who was standing next to the x-ray table. So then I really felt panicked, extremely panicked. And as the table continued to tip, my eyes started rolling to the back of my head, and I was trying super hard to keep them forward and fight it. And then the last thing that finally happened was that I started hyperventilating, and I couldn't control my breathing any longer. And I was going, and that's when they finally noticed something was wrong, because the x-ray tech stopped talking to the other guy, and he leaned way down over me, and he looked in my eyes, and he could see they were rolling backwards, and I was hyperventilating. And he leaned back. The last thing I saw was him lean back and look to see where his thumb was on the table. And when he saw where his thumb was, he made this look like that. So he realized at the very last second that he was actually pushing the wrong button on the table. He was lowering my head instead of raising it. So the dye that just injected into the back of my neck into my spinal cord was going into my brain directly instead of down my spine. So right at that point, when he made that funny face, I blanked out of my body. I shut my eyes, and 1 second later, I was up on the ceiling above my body, looking straight down at everything. And that guy who was pushing the button started calling code blue. And up on the ceiling, the panic was completely gone. I felt so wonderful. And I felt wrapped like in this soft, warm, beautiful blanket. And I felt like everything was just perfectly fine. And I looked down at the melee that was just now happening below. And I calmly said, if I'm up here and my body's down there and he's calling code blue, I think I just died. And there was no alarm, no worry. I didn't, feel scared or anything. And I felt this presence that was next to me on my left side over here. And I felt a presence that was not me. And I felt like I knew that presence from long before I started my life here on earth. It felt so incredibly loving and so eternal, and I knew it so well. When I was on the NBC Today show and I was invited to talk about my near-death experience, I was asked, did you look to see if there was a light or if there was any, thing you could see? And I said, no, I didn't even think of looking because I knew who it was. To me, it felt like it was God. I can't even say anything other than creator, God, the most beautiful being. And I just felt this beautiful connection to. So I began up on the ceiling watching everything happening down below, which was a melee of people screaming and rushing around. And they started CPR and they were doing chest compressions and blowing in my mouth. And the doctors were yelling out orders and the nurse was on the phone, and oh my gosh, it was crazy down below. But up there on the ceiling, I was completely calm, and I said to the being, I really would like to go back into my life. If I leave at this time in this way, then my children won't be protected any longer. They won't grow up to be the good human beings they're capable of being. I need to be there to contribute to them and to protect them from the situation that we're all in. So please let me go back. So I said that about 4 different times. I waited and I didn't hear anything come back from the other, from the being or anything said to me. So I said it again in a different way, how much I needed to go back. I needed to be there for my children. I needed to help them through the situation. And so then all this stuff had been happening. They got an oxygen cart into the room. This one man, he brought a heart monitor in, and I didn't know what it was. It was just a box. And he set it on this ledge that was on the wall, and he was standing between the table that I was laying on and the wall. And he was taking these little round circles that were white, peeling off the backs of them and putting them on my chest. And I'd never seen a heart monitor. I don't watch TV much, and I haven't really ever been a TV person. So I didn't know what it was. And so I said to the being, in the midst of asking to go back, I calmly said, what is that he's doing? Because I understood oxygen cart, and they stopped blowing in my mouth, and they continued to do the chest compressions. And, I understood everything else about the resuscitation, but I didn't get that. And the second that I said, "What is that he's doing?" I was moved from up on the ceiling right above my body to right in front of the heart monitor. And I watched as the man who was dealing those little white things on my chest, watched as his hand went between my face and the monitor, or I didn't have a face, it was my consciousness, and the monitor. And he flicked a little toggle switch, and then his hand, pulled away again. And I was right in front of the box, and I watched as this light started traveling across the upper part of the box in this rectangular green screen. And it made this monotone sound like beep. And this light was going in a straight line, and I didn't know what it was. And so I watched it go all the way across the screen, and then it started again, and it went all the way across the screen again. And then it started the third time, it started to go across the screen, and about a third of the way over, all of a sudden it triggered, "Oh, that's my heart. It's not beating. That's a heart monitor. It's supposed to be going up and down." So the second that I thought that, I was moved back up on the ceiling next to the being again. So it was kind of like I asked the question and he gave me the answer by putting me down there and letting me figure it out. So I'm back up on the ceiling again. I again asked to go back into my life. And down below, the neurosurgeon spoke to the orthopedic surgeon. Neither of them were actually physically doing anything. They were just calling out orders, and everybody else was doing everything. And the neurosurgeon said, this has lasted too long. She's going to be brain dead. We need to do something. And so the orthopedic surgeon said, "Stand clear." And the people that were around the side of the table that I was laying on, that he was on, they backed away from the head of the table. And he stepped 2 steps forward, took his fist from behind his back, and just went pow, and slammed his fist into the center of my chest. I'd never seen that before either. I didn't know what it was. It was a precardial thump, and I had never heard of that or seen it before. So what I noticed was that I was still up on the ceiling, and it hadn't done any good. And then I heard this amazing voice, and this voice said, "But if you go back, you'll still be in your marriage. What will you do?" And then I was shown like little film clips, all these little flashes that just went flash, 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 of all these incidents that had happened in the 7 years now that I'd been married to him. All of the hitting, the shoving, the pushing, the berating, the everything that he'd done, I saw it all. And then I was given all this time to think about everything. And so I considered all the times that I had talked to him, begged him, written a beautiful letter that said, "Please don't treat me like this. I can't live this way." I'd taken him to a marriage family counselor. He'd gone like 4 sessions, and then he gave it up. He wouldn't go anymore. It didn't help. I took him to a pastor of a church. He did the same thing, wouldn't go anymore. Didn't help. So I evaluated all the things that I'd done and everything I'd tried to do to try to help him change. And I loved the person that wasn't hitting me, but I couldn't live with the person who was. And I realized that I needed to make a change, and I needed to leave him and give up on trying to get him to change. And I said to the being, "If you let me go back, I promise you I'll get strong enough to leave him." And I really realized that it was, my strength had really diminished. Being raised by a police officer mom, I had been the bravest, boldest, strongest woman prior to meeting and marrying him. but he had really, really diminished me over those 7 years. And I was very scared of him. I was living in fear constantly. So when I said, I will get strong enough to leave him, the doctor down below, the orthopedic surgeon, struck my chest with a second blow. And the second that he struck my chest, my eyes shut up on the ceiling. And I opened my eyes and I was back in my body with the oxygen mask on my face. So I immediately talked in the oxygen mask because I had never heard of a near-death experience. I'd never tried meditation. I didn't know anything about anything like that. I was just a mom, working full time with kids, and I had no idea. So I said into the oxygen mask, "What just happened?" And the nurse leaned over me and she said, "Stop, don't talk. We need to stabilize you." So for 20 minutes, they did whatever they had to do to stabilize me. And they finally took the oxygen mask off my face. And everybody was standing there waiting to see what I was going to say. And I said, "What just happened?" I was up on the ceiling and I could see and hear everything. Well, the neurosurgeon standing right next to the table goes, "Oh, brother." And at 31 years old, with having an experience like that, nobody was going to shut me up. And I said, "I'm telling you the truth. I was up on the ceiling. She was calling on the phone for the defib unit saying stat, and it never came in. That lady brought in the oxygen card and you put it up to my face. But before that, he was doing chest compressions and he was blowing in my mouth. But after you did that, then they just switched off chest compressions every 1 or 2 minutes." I said, "You were calling out orders. You were calling out orders. You brought in that oxygen. You brought in that heart monitor, and I watched my flatline." And of course, the doctor was like, the neurosurgeon, he was reacting the most. He clenched his fists together like this, and he put them up next to his body like this, and he had this face on him like, and then he went, "I'm not going to stand here and listen to this." And he stormed out of the room. So everybody else stayed. The orthopedic surgeon took my hand and said, "Tell me again, what did you see? What did you hear? I want to hear this." So we talked, and about 15, 20 minutes later, they rolled me onto an oxygen cart, onto a gurney thing, and they moved me up to my room. And at that point, nobody would acknowledge that I'd even had what I didn't even know was called a near-death experience, or that I'd even had any kind of situation at all. Then when I would say, "What happened during the myelogram? What was that?" They would say, "I don't know what you're talking about. There's nothing here in the records. I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about." And so the next morning they prepped me and took me down to surgery. They did the surgery on my back, and they did a laminectomy, discectomy is what they did, cleaned out the area that had burst. And many years later, I ended up getting a titanium disc put in there, spinal surgery with the titanium disc. So now it's fine. But after the surgery, the 2 doctors came into the recovery area. And as they were walking towards me, I called out and said, "Can you tell me what happened last night?" And the neurosurgeon put his hand up like this, and he said, "I'm not here to talk about anything else other than what happened during your surgery." So he really closed me down. Then I got out of the hospital 4 days later with no one having talked to me about what happened during the myelogram. And about maybe a week or 10 days later, I had to go back to that doctor's office and see him for a follow-up. And I had my little baby daughter in my arms, and I said, "Could you tell me what happened during that myelogram?" And he put his hand up with his fingers spread out and said, I'm not talking about that. That's not anything I'm going to ever talk to you about, so you can forget it." So when I had gotten out of the surgery that morning, I had told my husband when he came that afternoon to the hospital, I told him what happened during the near-death experience. And he looked at me and with disbelief and said, "That couldn't have happened. You probably hallucinated all of it." So I was really shut down and I didn't know who to talk to about it. And I wasn't sure what people were going to think about me if I did talk about it. I'd always been, I'm a non-drinker. My mom always said she'd shoot my butt off if I drank or did drugs. So I was like, never going to do that stuff. So I didn't have anybody to talk to or anybody to tell it to. So I just put it inside and in a little box inside my heart, and I just kept it there. Every time I thought about it, if anything triggered me to think about it, it was as real and as if it just happened. But I didn't know who to talk to. So about 12 years passed, and by the way, I did divorce the husband, and he now lives about 5 hours away from here in Santa Barbara. And I have forgiven him, and I can see him and say a normal hello, and I don't hold anything against him. But, the traumas that I went through were great. So what ended up happening was that I decided in the 2 years after I divorced him, that I didn't want to trust anybody else. I was scared of, I just thought I've made 2 mistakes. I don't want to make another mistake. I don't want anybody in my life. I just want to be alone. So I didn't date anybody, and I just worked with my children and took them to all their, sports stuff and everything, and watched them grow. And I began thinking, if I ever do date anybody, I want to be able to tell the other side, tell God, tell whoever's helping me along the other side, what kind of a person that I want. So I began in the evenings before I went to bed, I began a little notebook next to my bed of character traits that I would want in someone if I ever let anybody back into my life. And I worked on that really consistently before bed for about 2 years. And before I would go to sleep, I would shut the book and I would say, God, I don't know who this person is, but I know that you know who it is. And if you could bring him to me in the right timing for him and for myself, and show me that it's the person that you've sent to me, just give me the ability to evaluate the pages that I've written all these character traits on and the person, and see that it's the right person, I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Good night. So 2 years after the divorce, my son walked into our apartment, and he was now 13 years old, and he had a 12-year-old girl with him that was a neighborhood friend. And he said, we'd like to go to a movie. Would you go with us? And I said, yes, I'd love to. And so at first I kind of was like, well, I've got a lot of stuff to do today because we're going to move next week, but okay. So it ended up that, yes, I'll go with you, because he kind of used his puppy dog eyes. Please, Mom. So what they were doing, those 2 little rascals in junior high school, were connecting me with her father, and they made us both go to the movie, and they made us sit next to each other, and then they wanted us to take them out to dinner afterwards. And so it started us dating, and they were putting us together, and I was able to, with the children along on our dates, kind of see the character traits that I had been listing on my list, and be able to tell that this was this good person that I'd been looking for. And so 6 months after we started dating with the children, we were married, and today is actually our 29th wedding anniversary. And I have the best possible husband in the whole world. He matches my list perfectly. And I had funny things on there too, I have to tell you. I had things like, must like TV dinners because I'm so tired of cooking. That was one of the character traits I put down. And he actually cooks for me, and I don't have to do much cooking because he likes to cook and he does it for me, and he did it for the kids and I. The other thing that was really funny was I put down, because I had dated somebody in college that was shorter than me. I'm 5'9", and I'm a tall, strong girl. And I dated somebody that was shorter than me, and we went to a dance, and he laid his head on my shoulder, and we were dancing. I was so uncomfortable. It was terrible. And so I put in the list of things, I put must be tall. And my husband is 7 feet tall. He's an ex-NBA basketball player, and he played for Golden State Warriors, and he's a super good guy. So that is a really important thing for all of us to remember, that if we ask for the other side to help us, and we know exactly what we're looking for, they can deliver it. But if we aren't sure of what we're looking for in our life, whether it be a job or a house or a human in our life, then we're not going to get what we want, because we don't really know what we want. So that was a really cool experience. One of the things that near-death experiencers have is that they have these after effects, and one of them is intuition. So I'd had all these experiences of intuition all the way back to my childhood. And the first one that I remember was when I was 5 years old. And my mom wasn't a police officer yet. She had my little sister was 3 years old, and then my 3 older siblings were 9, 12, and 13, I think. And we were standing on the street corner, my mom, my little sister, and I, in Salem, Oregon. And all of a sudden, I broke my mom's grip, and I was hanging onto her hand, and I took my hand out of her hand, and I covered up my face and my eyes. And I was standing there, and she looked down and she said, "What are you doing?" And I talked through my hands, and I said, "They're going to crash." And right then, a car ran the red light and crashed, T-boned into the car that was going through the intersection. And it was like right in front of us in the intersection. And my mom completely freaked out, got down on one knee, took me by the shoulders, and said, don't you ever tell anyone you can do that. Don't you ever tell anyone." And I was like, I had no idea what I'd just done. I just had felt this feeling was going to happen, and I just said that. So I got confirmed with that kind of, it scared her when I would have the intuitions, like the phone would ring and I'd know who was calling, or something else would happen and I would, blurt it out, and my mom would just freak out. So I learned to hide it a lot. And one of the things that happened was not an intuition moment, but a very beautiful spiritual moment. When I was about 17, I was working as a photographer for the newspaper. They had kindly taken me on, because I absolutely loved photography and had my own camera and everything, as an intern in the photography department at our local newspaper. And, being a girl, that was a great opportunity, and I loved it. So I rode my bike. We weren't allowed to get our driver's license till we were 18. And I rode my bike across this bridge every day to go, when I was working, to go over to work. And this one day I was riding my bike across the bridge, and I was a little bit late. So I was rushing along. And all of a sudden, as I'm riding my 10 speed across the bridge, this feeling like a hand is pushing my head down lower and lower. I couldn't fight it. It was over my handlebars until I'm like way down over my handlebars. And I was fighting it. I didn't want to look like I was a dork with my head down like a little 10-year-old riding like this. So I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I was fighting it. And it got me all the way down, this pressure. And then this big truck rumbled by from behind me, and its mirror was sticking way out from the side of the truck, and it literally brushed over the back of my head. And I felt it literally go like this. So my head was far enough down where it didn't hit me. And if I'd been riding upright, of course, it would have hit me in the middle of my back and knocked me off my bike, probably into the tires of the truck, or the car following it. I probably would have been killed. So I literally, once the truck passed, the pressure was gone, and I sat back upright on my bike and I stopped it and pulled it over. And I realized my life had just been saved. And it was so powerful. It really rocked my soul. I literally stood there on the side of the bridge looking out over the water because I didn't want everybody to see me crying. And I just burst into tears and started crying. And I was thanking God, and I was saying, you know, I appreciate you being in my life, and thank you for your helpers and whoever that was that helped me. And I appreciate it so much. And thank you for being in my life. And it's funny because my parents weren't religious at all. They didn't go to church. As a young person, there was a little Baptist church that I went to preschool at, and it was probably about a mile from our home. And at 5 years old, when my little sister was 3, my parents actually let me take my little sister and walk that mile all the way down to the Baptist church for Sunday school. They didn't go to church. They didn't drive us or anything. They let me walk my little sister all the way down there. And I didn't go to church for the religious side of it. I went to church because I felt, I don't know, a feeling of connection with God. And I realized when I got older that that feeling of connection felt the same whether I was sitting in the forest, or if I was sitting on my front doorsteps, or if I was sitting in my room or laying there, you know, going to sleep at night. I felt the connection so strongly that it never wavered. And I always felt that I was pressured, not pressured, a present was given to me by that beautiful gift of him being there and being around me. So another thing that happened to me was that when I was older and I had this intuition happening, I sometimes got negative aspects from other people as well. So one time in my high school years, I realized that at a party that a whole bunch of people that I knew were at, I didn't drink, so I wasn't drinking, but they were, that the police were coming. And I took 3 girls that were my best friends, and they were pretty drunk. And I said, you know, we need to come out here in these bushes. We need to go out in these bushes. And I pushed them off of the patio where the party was, and I pushed them out into this underbrush. And right after I did that, the police actually arrived and arrested the underage people, which would have been my 3 girlfriends, not me, because I hadn't been drinking. And so I saved them from that situation. But one of them didn't know, you know, how to react to, how did you know they were coming? Your mom now was a cop. Are you a narc? And did you tell that this party was happening here? And I hadn't known where the party was going to be, and I didn't drive to the party, so I had no idea where it was. And so I explained that to them. How would I have known? I didn't know where it was. And so then she ended up, when I told her that I had kind of blinked my eyes and seen the police coming down the driveway, long driveway up to the house where it was at, I said, I saw them coming a silent approach with their lights on, but no sirens. And I said, I knew they were coming. And she started calling me a witch, and it caught on at school. She called me a witch at school. She told people about the incident, and people started looking at me weird. And it was really hard on me to try to get past that, because, you know, I felt that the intuition was helping, but obviously, you know, it was scary to other people, and not only my mom. So what ended up happening was that I ended up going to a IANDS conference in 2009. And at that conference, PMH Atwater, a near-death experience researcher that's quite well known, she was there at the conference, and I was sitting in the audience, and she was talking about the after effects. And I really hadn't, it was my very first IANDS conference. I was invited by Dr. Jeffrey Long and his wife Jody from the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation. It was in San Diego. I had driven down from Santa Barbara. It just happened to be on the West Coast that year. So I really didn't know much about near-death experiences yet. I hadn't really researched. Internet really wasn't quite as far as it is now. I had looked at some of it, but I don't know, it wasn't really there. So what ended up happening was that PMH was talking about the after effects. And as she was talking about them, I was identifying with them and thinking about all those experiences that I'd had that matched those after effects, especially the intuition. And so after the talk that she did, I got a chance to talk with her, and I said, what I don't understand is that my near-death experience that happened to me when I was 31 years old, how could I have the after effects all the way back to my early childhood? I don't understand. If you're saying those are after effects that should happen after my near-death experience, why would they be all the way back? And she took my hands and she was really gentle, and she said, I think you should talk to your family to see if there's something that happened to you in your early life that might have also been a near-death experience. So at the time when she did that, I thought, are you kidding? I had 2 of these? That can't possibly be. So I ended up shortly afterwards, a couple months later, going to Oregon, and my older brother was 10 years older than me, and we went to dinner with him and his wife and his daughter. And after the dinner, I said to him, Brad, I'm kind of doing a background history on my medical stuff. So I'm listing all of my, I don't know, everything, surgeries and, all the things that have happened. And I kind of don't remember my early childhood. So if you remember anything that I should put in there that might be important, could you think about it and let me know? And he just was like, looked at me and he said, Barb, there's something that I always knew that I should tell you, but I never felt like it was the right time. He said, you died when you were 18 months old. And I just couldn't even believe he said that. Like, what? And he said, yeah, you had a really high fever. You were really super sick. And Mom was pregnant with my little sister, Jan. And he said, Dad went in on the phone and called the fire department, which was like 911 back then, 1958. And he said the fire department told him, and he called out to my mom to put my body up to my neck in tepid bath water, and then to slowly add ice cubes to slowly lower the temperature of the water, to slowly lower my body temperature. Because I guess I found out, later as I was an adult, that if you put a child that's unconscious like that into cold water, that you can put them into shock. So my mom had the bath water, and we only had 1 tray of ice cubes. So she sent both of my brothers over to the neighbors' houses to get ice cubes. And when my oldest brother came back, he witnessed me self-resuscitate. He said, all of a sudden, you were purple when I handed Mom the ice. You were lifeless. You weren't breathing. He said, and all of a sudden, you came back to life. You arched your back and took a deep breath in, and then you burst out crying, and you turned from purple to red in the flash of a second. And he said, then the ambulance people came in, wrapped you up in a blanket, and took you out. And then the parents went to leave. And he said that my sister came up the stairs, and she was only 6 years old. And she said, why was Barbie having a temper tantrum? Because the babysitter person that was helping my mom, because she was imminently going to be delivering with the other 4 kids, had told her that I was, throwing a temper tantrum upstairs and she couldn't go up. So my mom stopped, my brother said, and looked over my sister's head and looked at the babysitter and said, I'll talk with you when I get back. And she said, I have to go now. And she went out the door with my father. And when my siblings, when my parents came back, I guess she talked to the babysitter and she fired her, and they never saw her again, which she had been kind of a close person in their lives. And my mom felt so angry about the babysitter saying that she, or maybe it was just my mom's attitude that day, she was so upset she fired the babysitter. So my older sister remembers the incident as well. So both of them have validated that that situation happened. So it helped me to understand, and it helps a lot of people out there in the world when they hear my talks. When you investigate what the after effects are for a near-death experience and you find that they resonate with your life, you might want to look backwards and see or talk with your family or neighbors. Maybe my brothers and sisters, my sister and my two brothers were told never to tell me what had happened that day. My parents told them never to speak about it. So I was like 55 years old when I finally found out that that had happened. So that's part of what my gift is, to talk about my near-death experience, but also talk about the fact that, this can happen when you don't even know that it's happened to you. And the after effects are much more of what you want to look at to see if maybe that is something that will give you an answer that you've been looking for. Some of the things in the intuition side that I've had have been pretty amazing. And it's not exactly intuition, but it's more like the other side coming in and affecting my life. And what happened was about 5 years ago, I had gone up to San Francisco and I was talking at 4 different IANDS groups up there. And we were up there, my husband and I, for about 5 days. We had driven up. It's about a 5.5-hour drive. And we were coming back from San Francisco, and just north of Santa Barbara is the Gaviota coastline. And we just had Earth Day, and Earth Day was started in Santa Barbara because of a big oil spill that happened up at Gaviota. Well, what happens is the freeway comes from inland and it runs into the ocean area, and it curves and it comes down along the ocean to Santa Barbara, and that's called the Gaviota coastline. So it's about 30 miles north of Santa Barbara. And we hit that location, and it was about 9 o'clock at night, and it was dark, getting pretty, it was just had gotten just past like sunset. And so it was getting pretty dark. I was looking out the window. My husband was driving our van, and I was looking at, the moon coming up and etc. And this big gust of wind, it's a really windy area up there. And there's this kind of area between the mountains where the wind just gushes through from the ocean. And so this big gust of wind hit the side of our van. And I said to my husband, I think we ought to slow down. I think we ought to do, less than 65 miles an hour. I'm going to sneeze. Sorry. Okay. So we, excuse me, sorry about that. So my husband slowed down and said, yes, I think that's true. I think we should slow down. And we were going along, and I was, looking out the window thinking everything was okay. And all of a sudden, in the ear that was next to the window, this voice said, danger, big impact ahead, danger, big impact. And I was like laying back in my seat, and I had like my stocking feet up on the dashboard of our Toyota van, and it freaked me out that I just heard that. So I put my feet on the floor and I sat my seat up, and I checked my seatbelt, make sure it was nice and tight in case we're going to hit anything. Wanted to be secure in my seat. And then I turned to look at Victor and I said, you know how I sometimes hear from the other side? And he said, yes, And I said, well, I just heard danger, big impact ahead, danger, big impact. And so I said, I think we should slow down more than, we're doing 50. I think we should do 30 miles an hour. And Victor looked at me and went, what? He said, Barbara, we're on the freeway. We can't do 30 miles an hour. And I turned and looked through the back of the van. I hadn't really been noticing traffic or anything. I hadn't even been watching for that. I'd been looking out the window at the moon. And I looked through the back of the van, and there was no traffic behind us and no one ahead of us. We were on the freeway by ourselves, which is really kind of weird for that area because there's only 2 ways basically into Santa Barbara, from the south or the north. And so I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And so I said, it's not going to be a bother for us to do 30 miles an hour because there's no traffic behind us. And if someone catches up and you see lights coming, then you can speed back up to 50 if that makes you more comfortable. But we need to be doing a lower speed so that we don't run into whatever's ahead. They warned us, and we need to listen to this. So he said, okay, I can do that. We'll go 30. So he's going along 30 miles an hour for like 10 minutes. Nobody ever caught up with us. And we come around this bend in the highway, and way up ahead in the dark is one single police car's lights. And right here, I knew that that was where the danger was. So we were in the slow lane doing 30. And as we were approaching the police car, I was like looking through, like trying to see what's the danger, what's the danger. The first thing I noticed was that the police car wasn't parked off the freeway in the median strip or, off to the side. He was parked and stopped slowly. Stopped perfectly in the slow lane, blocking it. So we were going to have to go around it into the fast lane to get past it. So the other thing I noticed, there was no police officer in his car or anywhere within the range of his lights that were lighting up the dark. If there's no street lights up there. So it was like, where's the police officer? Well, my husband started to change lanes about 30 to 50 yards behind the cop car. I'm not really good on distances. And he started to change lanes. And when he did, whoever it was that was warning me decided to grab both of my upper arms. So I literally felt hands grab my upper arms. I felt a face come right up nose to nose with me. And I kind of saw a shimmer of a face. And then they screamed, 10 miles an hour. And I completely freaked out because they were grabbing my arms and their face was right in front of me. And I screamed and echoed 10 miles an hour really loud to Victor. And he immediately slowed down. He was now in the fast lane and he slowed down. So by the time we got to the cop car, we were doing 10 miles an hour. No cop anywhere inside the car, no cop. We still didn't see any cop. We passed the cop car maybe 20, 30 feet. And finally, our lights of our van lit up the bottom of the semi-truck that had turned over on its side. The dirty bottom of the truck was facing us. So no reflectors or anything. And we were heading directly for the cab of the truck, which was laying in the fast lane, which is where the gas tanks are. So we would have had the cab of the truck. Our impact would have been there. Because we were only doing 10 miles an hour, we were able to go off the roadway on the left-hand side very carefully and slowly and go around the truck. On the far side of the truck, I looked out my window and the cop was standing up on top of the truck and he was talking to the truck driver who was trapped inside through the window at the top of the truck. It was really a powerful experience. I immediately started saying thank you to the other side and saying, I really appreciate my life. I appreciate Victor's life. I appreciate the cop's life. I appreciate the truck driver's life. Thank you for changing that outcome. I'm so grateful to you to be in my life. So about 10 miles down the road, as I'm still thanking, my husband finally says, Barbara, if I had not just seen that unfold in the way that it did, and you told me this story, even after marrying you for all this time, being married to you, he said, I never could have believed it. I had to see that to believe it. That was absolutely incredible. How do you do that? And I said, Victor, it's not me doing it. It's only me having the open door for them to come through to help me. And what I think everybody needs to have is that feeling that they have that connection and that they trust that connection with the other side. And whether that was God, whether that was an angel, whether that was my deceased grandmother or grandfather or whoever, I have no idea who helps. And I don't need to know. But what I need to be is thankful for them to come in and step into situations like that and make a difference. Because that's giving me the feeling that I can live my life without worrying, without panic, without fear, that I have that help always. And I don't even need to ask for it. I just need to say thank you and have that open door. There have been a lot of other experiences in my life that have happened that have been amazing. And my husband, gets to see these, and it's pretty shocking to him. So one of the other ones was when we got married, it was about 2 years later, I was going to have a baby. And so we had our own child together. And I was pregnant with my child, and I was about 6 months along. And my husband had the flu, and I went in to give him an ice pack to lower his body temperature. And when I got the ice pack out of the freezer, I don't know why that triggered it, but when I opened the freezer door, I got the knowledge right here that I was going to have an 11-pound baby. So my first one had been 7.5 pounds. My second one was 8.5 pounds. This was going to be a monster huge child. And I was very scared. So I went into my husband with the ice pack and I said, I just had an intuitive moment, and I'm going to have an 11-pound baby. I don't know what to do. And he said, well, you need to talk to your OBGYN and, tell him to check to see if something's, bigger than the baby's bigger than normal. We'd already had the ultrasound in the 3rd month. So when I asked the doctor on 2 different occasions, on 2 different visits, could we do another ultrasound? I mean, I really worried I'm having a large baby. My husband's 7 feet tall. I'm 5'9". My sister's 6'3". We're huge people. Could this be, a really large baby? He said, no, you're just scaring yourself. Don't even consider it. Forget it. We already had the ultrasound. Everything's fine. So the very last visit before the baby was supposed to be born, so about maybe 2 weeks before his due date, I decided to level with him and tell him I was a near-death experiencer and that I had these intuitions and that I knew that I was having an 11-pound baby and I needed to do something about it. So when I posted that to him, he said, you know what, if you want to continue talking about this, why don't you find yourself another doctor, because I'm not going to discuss it with you any longer. Forget it. So I went home, and I was working full time, and I had 4 kids, and here I'm monstrously pregnant, and I didn't have time to go find, or the energy or the effort to go find another doctor. So I just spent my time until the baby was born. He came a week later, so 1 week early. I spent my time talking to God and saying, I'm going to need your help with this because the doctor's not listening. So we got to the hospital on the day of the delivery, and they put me into the stirrups, and the doctor came in, told me to push. He delivered my son's head. And I didn't know it was a son at the time because I hadn't asked to find out the baby's, whether it was a boy or girl. So that's when the doctor realized, with the head out, that the baby was too large to come through the birth canal. He should have done a C-section. And he panicked, rolled backwards in his chair, and screamed down the hallway, is there another doctor in the near vicinity? I need assistance, stat! Nobody came. So he turned around and he faced the nurse that was at the front of the table, the top of the table where my head was, and my husband was on the other side of the table, and me, and he said, I'm going to have to break its shoulders to get it out. That was pretty scary to me, and I sent the biggest prayer of my life up and said, please, God, I know we tried to warn him and he didn't listen. Please don't make the baby suffer. Please help. So the baby was delivered, and maybe 10 minutes later, shoulders were not broken. The baby's APGAR score was a 1, which is 1 to 10. 1 is 1 mark off of dead. 10 is perfectly healthy. He had a 1 at the 1st minute, and he had a 3 at the 5-minute mark. My other babies were 9 at the 1st minute and 10s at the 5-minute mark. So he was very, very possibly even had a near-death experience in his birth as well. Years later, I was doing electromagnetic research questionnaire from the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies. And my son was about 18 years old by that time. And he came up and said, "What are you doing, Mom?" And I said, "I'm doing a research questionnaire." And he picked up a second copy that I had of it, started looking through it, and he said, "Huh, well, that happens to me. Well, I've had that happen before." Well, and although he's 28 now and not really, I guess, able to kind of admit that he's had a near-death experience, I think that perhaps he may have had one in that birth, which is pretty surprising to me because after my father died, I received a box of his stories that he had been writing when he was in his 70s up in Salem, Oregon, and Woodburn, Oregon, where he lived. And he had been taking a writing class. And I didn't, when he died, I was really hurt. I was sad for him. I missed him. And I didn't want to read the stories quite yet. But then the box got set aside and we didn't locate it for another 15 years. And when I finally opened the box and started reading the stories, maybe about 4 years ago, the third story that I read was the one of my father explaining his near-death experience that happened in a lake up in, I think it was Utah. And he was a swimming instructor, and he had had shallow water blackout, which is where you faint underwater after you've done a lot of exertion and swimming really hard. If you go underwater to swim underwater, which he was doing, he fainted underwater and his body sunk to the bottom, and he exited his body and went up. And as he was floating up above the earth, he ended up saying, "I'm too young. I'm too young. I want to go back. I want to live my life." And he said that he reversed direction and went back down into his body, reactivated it, swam to the surface, swam to the shore, and then sat there and didn't know how to explain that to the other people that were with him. They hadn't noticed the whole thing had happened. And he said, it was really life-changing for him. So I now found that my father had a near-death experience and never spoke to me about it, never told my little sister or I or anybody in our family about it. And I think possibly my son may have had a near-death experience in his birth situation as well. So that draws me to say, a lot of people out there could have had a near-death experience and not want to talk about it. Also, they may have had one and not realize they've had one and just be able to detect it from the after effects if they look that up online at the IANDS website or the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation website. So I really feel that, the gift is that understanding that death isn't anything to be scared about. I felt so beautiful when I was out of my body, and I felt so loved and so cared for. And I don't think that that is different for anyone else. From all the near-death experiencers that I've spoken with, I think that there can be some near-death experiencers that perhaps think that they've done negative things in their life and that they deserve something worse, and they could maybe perhaps experience something like that in their near-death experience and feel like they're initially in hell, like Eben Alexander called it, the worm.
That's what I do.
Yeah. So I think that people can possibly think that there's something beyond the love and the goodness, but I don't know that it actually exists. I didn't feel anything other than love and goodness, and I've really felt that I was cared for and would forever be cared for, and I'd be happy to be home again, go over to the other side. And I don't call it heaven and hell, I call it home. And I feel that we came from there before we ever came here, and I think that we come here to grow our souls. So with all the people who've talked about their near-death experiences and their life reviews, I feel, I had a life review, but it was only to teach me about my husband's behaviors and help me to get past feeling as though I could help him. So the life review that I want to have when I finally finish my life is one where I've helped other people, been kind, found ways to make the world a better place, lived with love and kindness and good things in my life. And I think that, that's what we're here to experience and what we're here to achieve. So I just hope everybody, addresses that and tries to choose the, good things in their life to focus on. And that's kind of the gift that I hope to give with my near-death experience. The understanding that we don't have to fear death and that our consciousness survives it. And our life here is for living and loving and being kind and enjoying, and then, go back home where we're all loved. So if anybody, by the way, if you have any questions, I'm hoping that you've been typing them in the chat, and I'd be happy to answer anything as far as I, understand my near-death experience and its impacts. And there's things that I don't know. I can't answer, some things because I don't know it all. I admit that. But I really feel that the near-death experiences that are shared out there in the world are teaching us all some really incredible information that helps us all to live our lives in a better way. And so the more you read them, the more, even if you haven't had them, they've done, research that shows that if you absorb these near-death experiences, that you learn the concepts that were taught through the near-death experiences to the near-death experiencer. You learn the same thing that I learned, same thing that Evan Alexander learned, Nita Morjani learned, and Jeff Olson learned. We're here to be good. We're here to be kind. We're here to love. We're here to grow our souls. So there doesn't mean that there aren't negative things that we have to go through, because obviously I had that ex-husband that was traumatic, but forgiving him and getting past that and having the husband that I have and the life that I have now, it really shows me that I achieved that one. So if there's any questions.
Yes, let's encourage everybody to write some questions. I have a couple of questions for you, Barbara.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your experience with mainline religious institutions since your near-death experience, and also a little bit about the work that you're doing or have done amongst the medical community to try to raise awareness.
Yeah. So here in Santa Barbara, I run the IANDS group here in Santa Barbara, and one of the people who are on my board is a medical doctor, a physician here in town, and he had really good connections with the hospital. So he got on board with another doctor who also believes in near-death experiences, and they had me do a grand rounds talk at Cottage Hospital system here in Santa Barbara. And that was a real opening for me. I felt, here I am in Santa Barbara, and I kind of, there's about 125 people that normally come to my meetings. When Eben Alexander came, there were 900 people. When Anita Morjani came, there were 450. We've had this wonderful grouping of people that come from all over, even down in Los Angeles. They'll drive up to go to the meeting here. But I didn't think that the hospital and the medical staff but when I went and did the grand rounds talk, I was told afterwards there were about 60 doctors that showed up, plus a whole bunch of the medical staff that were the sporting people, and it was packed. And they told me that never happens. And he said that the impact that I had on the medical staff and the doctors at the facility was incredible, and that they are all, talked about it and wanted to, research more and find out more. I talked about how the doctors needed to be open to the fact that a patient in front of them could come to, like I did, come back into my body and, ask what just happened, and that they should be open to that and say, there's a lot of information online. It could be called a near-death experience. You could research that and find out more information. Even if they don't want to give information, they can just say to research it and that it's a possibility that it was a near-death experience. So then I also wanted to kind of connect with the religious communities as well, because I felt that they taught about God, but they didn't like really, most of them didn't really act as though God was present here and, capable of changing the outcome of something. It just didn't feel like they really, really understood that it's possible. So I talked with a couple of churches, and I felt like the doors were kind of closed. Um, I talked there, and they were positive when I talked there, but the rest of the churches were kind of closed. But then I went to Salt Lake City, and I gave a talk in Salt Lake City, and it was packed, and it was Mormons. And it really made me feel excited over the fact that they understand it and accept it, and it's part of their reality, that near-death experiences are real. So then I got contacted by Guideposts, which is a very religious organization. They do a lot of books and spiritual books on God and angels and etc. And they actually wanted to put my near-death experience story into one of their books. They are doing a series of 10 books called Witnessing Heaven. They have 5 of them out already, and my story, and also Kim Clark Sharp, who is the IANDS leader. She was the very first group leader of all of the IANDS groups in the United States, was started by Kim Clark Sharp in Seattle, Washington, and her story is in the same book with mine. And this is what it looks like: Witnessing Heaven, True Stories of Transformation from Near-Death Experiences. A Choir of Angels is what this book is called. There are 4 other books currently. A Love Beyond Words, Transformed by Heaven.
Would it be accurate, Barbara, to say, because I'm trying to put this in the chat so everybody can see. Witnessing Heaven, there's a Witnessing Heaven series by Guideposts.
Yes, exactly.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, Messages from Heaven and Heavenly Encounters. So they're the actual stories from near-death experiencers, and it doesn't have to be as, like, some of them are not focused on the God side of it. It might be mentioned, but it's not. Yeah, they're trying to get this into the communities out there in the world that are Christian, that will accept, because it's coming from Guideposts. And I really think that's beautiful that they are stepping forward in the Christian communities and bringing this forward. So I think a lot more churches will open up to it, and I think a lot more people's hearts will open up to it, and I think that it's on its way to becoming standard out there for people to understand. I think we were all perhaps taught wrong when we were young, and it's kind of just been multiplied over the years. But I really think that this is a new opening for us to all understand much better what death is and what life is.
So I did the best I could. I've got some typos here, but Witnessing Heaven series by Guideposts, and then
yes, good.
Did a direct link. Thank you for sharing that. While we're waiting for some more questions, let me also ask you, so how did the other side help you in terms of building courage and negotiating, navigating your way out of that abusive marriage?
Yeah. Well, when I made that promise up there to what I felt was God, I got, down on the table, and nobody believed that I just had that situation, but it was so real in my heart, and I knew that I'd made that promise. It actually took me 3 years of preparation and planning to safely get away from my husband, because he was so abusive and so dangerous. I actually thought there were some times that he might kill me to benefit from the insurance payment that he would get. I had to find the safest way out. There's a cute story that goes along with that. When I found out that he was going to go on a business trip to Montreal, Quebec, Canada, I drove him. It was 3 years after I'd had my near-death experience. I put all these pieces in order, and I was, ready to go. And I drove him to the airport, and I, put him on the plane, kissed him goodbye. And I had looked in the newspaper for locations in Santa Barbara that I could afford on my own income. By then I was a travel agent here in Santa Barbara, and my salary wasn't, terrifically great. So what I ended up doing was looking for an apartment that I could afford. And I went to, after I put him on the plane, I took the day off from work and I went to 4 different apartments, and I told them, I'm in a really terrible situation with a husband who's abusive, and I need to get away and I need to escape. I need a safe place to move to. And I don't know what his reaction is going to be when he comes back and finds me gone. But I'm just going to let you know that I have only been able to save up the first month's rent, and I haven't been able to save because he controls all the money. I haven't been able to save the deposit yet, but what I'll do is I'll pay each month 1/10 of the deposit, along with my rent, and that I can cover that with my salary. And if you'll allow me to do that over the next 10 months to pay the deposit, I really need your help. Well, 4 people said, no, I'm sorry, you can't move in. And it was towards the end of the day, and I needed to pick up my daughter, who was about 3.5 by then, at the preschool by a certain time, or else I would have to be charged a lot of money for each 15 minutes post that time. So I went to the 5th person. I looked at the apartment and I told him the same thing. And he looked at me for the longest time, and he just looked into my eyes, and he just looked at me, and then he said, you can move in. And I burst into tears, and I couldn't control myself. I was crying so hard. And I said, thank you so much. And why are you believing me? 4 different people today wouldn't let me move in. And I promise you I'll pay the deposit. I'm a good person. Why are you believing me? And he looked at me with this beautiful face, and he said, I grew up in the Netherlands during World War II. And he said, my parents had many, many families and individuals who came and knocked on our door that were escaping from Nazi Germany. They had no place to go. They had nothing but what they were carrying with them. Sometimes they needed food. Sometimes they slept on our floor of our living room of our house. Sometimes my parents gave them blankets that we couldn't really afford to give, or a coat. And he said, my parents every time helped those people in every way that they could. And today, I'm helping you in honor of my parents. That man was the kindest, nicest. He and his wife were the sweetest people. And I stayed there for the 2 years. If I had not moved to that apartment, I would never have met my husband in the future, because he lived 1/2 block away from where I moved to. So my son would have never met his daughter, and I would have never been in the life that I'm in now. I know there's a plan out there that they have, that they are going to find you the path that you need to go on. So I believe strongly that you should believe in them and understand that your best interests are at their heart. And I've seen that happen again and again and again in my life, in jobs that I wanted that would have been maybe a terrible position that I would have taken if I'd gotten offered the job. And after I was sad that I didn't get the job, ended up talking to the person who got it, and found out that the person who was over that position was horrendous in their behavior. And I would have been trapped in a very terrible work situation had I gotten that job that I wanted so badly. But instead, I got the job that I didn't know that I wanted, and that turned out to be beautiful. So it's really interesting how they have your best interests at heart, and you need to know what you want. You need to be clear with them what you're looking for. And then I really feel that they'll help you in whatever ways they need to, even if it's, pushing your head down over your handlebars of your bike, or, slowing you down before you hit the giant semi truck that's across the freeway, I think that everybody has that capacity to receive those gifts, but it's really something we're connecting to them and believing that they're there. Whether you call it God, whether you call it Susie Tidball, it doesn't make any difference. They don't care. They don't care. They don't care that you're, getting down on your knees. That's not them. They just want to love us, and they just want to be here for us, and they want us to have, the best possible life. And I think they want to help us through it. So I really feel it's important for people to understand that.
But you clearly open yourself to this, because I would imagine that it's there for everyone.
Everyone.
You have to be open to it.
Yep.
So your near-death experience when you're 18 months old no doubt predisposed you to these intuitions, but you're open to the intuitions. You listen.
Right, exactly.
A lot of people, many of us don't listen. And
Yeah.
we do the hard way, etc.
People that haven't had a near-death experience have intuition all the time. It doesn't mean that intuition is from a near-death experience. It means intuition is the other side planting something in your head, like, don't go down that alleyway. That looks like it might be dangerous. It's the other side telling you, helping you in some way, to help your life to be better. I really feel that.
Right. And I'd like to invite some of our members, if they want to share briefly, if they've had any kind of experiences like that themselves. Let me ask you, the experience you had when you were on the ceiling, out of body, on the ceiling when you passed away, near-death experience at the age of 31, and you felt that there was an entity, a presence there, and you believe it was God. Can you describe that experience, that entity, in some way?
Absolute love, acceptance, warmth, very eternal. Felt the connection long before I ever came into the earth. It felt as though I'd been connected to it for eons, centuries. I was part of it, perhaps. I knew who it was so much that I didn't even question it. It was just this incredible connection that just was bigger than life. There's no words to even explain it, because it was right next to me, and I knew who it was. It was just, I knew that I could talk to it, and I could tell it my heart's wishes were to protect my children through their lives. And, it gave me my life again, and my son, who was just a little critter, and my daughter, who was just a baby. They're 42 and 34 years old, and I've been able to help guide them and love them through all these years. And I got this wonderful husband who also loves and adores them, along with his own children and our child that we had together. We have 5 altogether. We've also hosted 17 foreign exchange students from all over the world. And I really feel that opening your life and adopting by love is what I call it. Other people, whether that be an elderly person, which I've adopted a number of elderly persons all the way till their death, just contributing to their life, loving them, being there, going to the CVS pharmacy and picking up their prescription if I needed to do that for them. I have been incredibly blessed by the nicest people, and I know that when I cross over, I'll get to see those moments that I helped those people, and the love that I've given the people that I've adopted by love. I'll get to see how that affected them, and it affected and passed on to others, because they learned that, loving behavior perhaps from me, or I helped contribute to their loving behavior. So for me, it's just I literally try to find every day, every way that I can to do something that's nice for someone else. And, you know, I have no problems at all with, I've got to tell you what happened the other day. We were at the service station and my husband was pumping gas into our van and I was behind the wheel and I watched as this man came out of the service station food store, and he was elderly, like probably in his 80s. He was in a wheelchair and he was very, very bent over at the waist over his knees in the wheelchair. And he was just rolling with his hands like inches each time. He would just roll inches and then roll inches and roll inches. And he was just barely making it across the parking lot in front of my van. Now, I could have sat in my van and just, you know, watched that and thought, oh, I feel so sorry for him. But what I did was I grabbed a $20 bill out of my purse and I went over to him and I got down close to him and I said, hi, my name is Barbara and I'd really like to buy you dinner tonight. Is that okay? And he looked at me kind of sideways like this, you know, and he goes, that'd be beautiful. And I got a real strong feeling that he was homeless or destitute. And so I gave him the $20 and then he looked at me and he said, would you do something else to help me? I need help. And I said, if I can, I will. And he said, I have this lidocaine patch that I'm supposed to apply to my back, at the back of my spine where I have my problems. And it's to relieve pain. And I can't put it back there. I can't reach it. And I said, I'd love to do that for you. So right there in front of this four-way intersection with all these cars and everything looking at me, I scooted his jacket up tenderly and his shirt up, and I applied the patch, and then I said, is that where you'd like that? And he said, yes, that's exactly. And I pulled the shirt back down and the coat back down, and he said, God bless you. You're my angel. And you know what? It felt to me like he was my angel. I felt like I was the one who was blessed by that situation, not him. I felt like I'd been given the gift. I literally, it lights up my whole heart when I talk about it. I almost start crying. It was such a moment that I'll never forget. And everybody has those moments that are available to them. And I just wish that everybody would take the moment and love people and find ways to do things like that to others, even if it's just opening a door for someone or carrying packages, helping someone out to their car, or anything that you can do, just touch a life. It really gives you way more than it gives the other person. And I mean that from the center of my heart. It touches your heart so beautifully.
Do you have any idea, any sense of why it took you sort of 4 times to ask to come back before you really got a response? Do you have any sense of what was? I know that the response was, what will you do about your abusive husband?
I don't know why. Each time I was kind of asking it in a different way. And so I was, initially said, because I need to protect my children. And then the second one was that I need to, help them to grow up. And if they are in this dangerous situation, they won't grow up to be the good human beings. I was really from my heart talking about how I could contribute to them if I was there, but that if I was gone, how their lives, I thought, would be so damaged. And I, said that while they were doing all that stuff down below in this gentle, easy way to this being. I wasn't at all, I need to go back. There was none of that at all. None, the zero. It was simply, please, may I please go back? And I don't know why 4 times. I think it was just the timing of the strike of the chest happened after they had done a bunch of other stuff. And the strike on the chest didn't restart my heart the first strike, but the second one, I had all that time in between the first and the second strike. And I'm pretty sure they were one right after another. But up there, it felt like time spread out, and that I had, saw those little film clips and saw all that damage. And then spent all that time thinking about all the things that I had done to try to make a change to his life, and then realizing that I wasn't doing any good with making a change, that I needed to do the change, and that I needed to move on and let him move on in a different way. So it was interesting. The whole thing was interesting because unfortunately, I know that he didn't change in his life. And I know from my daughter's input, and his other daughter that he had previous to my marriage, he had a daughter, and both of them have nothing to do with him. So I know that he didn't make changes in his life to choose, and it's actually cost him his daughters, his only two children. So I feel sad for him because of that, but I don't hold anything against him for those years. And when I see him, I'm polite and friendly, and yeah. So
So,
yeah.
so we have a comment and a question from Kristen. She says, thank you for sharing your story. It was amazing to hear it and how you've come to understand your purpose in life from it. Do you think the near-death experience removes fear of death?
Absolutely. There's so many people that contact me because there's a documentary online on YouTube about my near-death experience that Anthony Chen from France did. And I think it's had like, I don't know, 670,000 views or something like that. I don't know. I don't check it all the time. But people contact me because I'm really easy to find. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but whenever anybody calls or they email me, I try always to contact back again. And I've formed some lovely relationships with people that aren't in the IANDS world. And those relationships have resulted in a couple of, adopted by love people that are in my life because I feel that I needed to contribute to them in a bigger way. So they're, contacting me a lot and I'm contacting them a lot. But I really feel that the fear of death is when you hear these near-death experiences and you hear the changes that it's happened in people's lives and you feel what they're saying, which is that there wasn't any fear in my heart when I was out of my body, that I felt only love and only acceptance and only warmth and kindness and compassion. And it was just so incredibly beautiful. Why would you fear that? I don't want to die with, some sort of terrible pain. I don't want to last for a long time and have to be on a lot of, hospital stuff. I'm hoping that's not the way I'm going to end up going, but I don't know if that's the plan. So I know that once I do pass over, that I am fine and I don't have to worry about it. So I don't really think about how I'm going to get there. I just think about the end result being home, beautiful. And I always, when I write home, I put an H and then a heart for the O, and then I put M-E. So I think that home is just filled with love. And I look forward to being there, and I look forward to the growth that I will get from being there. And I honestly feel, I've never read anything about reincarnation or anything else, but my resonance in my heart is that we come back multiple times and we are here to learn multiple lessons and see both sides of things. And so
I have a question. When you were giving birth to your last child, your son,
yeah,
and you had the message that it was going to be an 11-pound baby, and the doctor just didn't want to listen, and then he discovered in the process of delivery that you were actually right, and he said he'd have to break the baby's shoulders, and you prayed on that. Presumably the baby's shoulders weren't broken.
No, they
were
weren't.
you able to deliver as best you could without it being drastic, even though you believe that your son had an experience?
Yeah, exactly. The birth then, it was a baby being delivered, but it didn't feel like anything different than my other two babies. And so how he was able to do that, and the baby was like 27.5 inches long and 11 pounds. It was huge. And he's now 6'6" and monster kid. And so yeah, I don't know. I really feel like when you're in the situation and you send up those prayers, and you have that connection, I just feel like they come through for you. And I don't have very many examples when things haven't come through. It's funny that negatives that seem to be negatives sometimes turn into positives. And you think you want this, and instead you get that, and it turns out to be better than that, the first thing that you wanted. So I think that it's, a life that we should enjoy, find ways to live your life purpose. And your life purpose could be something very simple, just loving one other person. I just feel like my life purpose is to talk about my near-death experience. And I was going to tell you, so I didn't want to talk about my near-death experience, of course, because I was scared what people would think. Santa Barbara is this kind of a small town. My husband's kind of known here because he's 7 feet tall and played basketball, and I don't want to speak and scare my children and make them feel weird that mom had this thing happen. So what ended up happening was that I was at the university at UC Santa Barbara, and I was in the Gewurz Graduate School of Education. I loved my job. I was fundraising. My boss and I had raised $10 million for the Graduate School of Education, which has a PhD program in for teachers. And so I was happy. I was so happy. So one day I'm in my house, and my youngest son was living in this bedroom. This was his room. He was in 3rd grade. And I came in to wake him up. And after I, said, "Hey, Tori, time to wake up. Come on, buddy." I went outside into the living room, and there's a picture window that kind of looks out at the mountains behind Santa Barbara. And I was kind of just walking past it and looked out the window. And all of a sudden, there was this feeling like these 2 hands were on the back of my head, holding on to the back of my head. And I, stopped in front of the window, and I like, what the heck? And put my hands up like this to touch my head, to like, why is that pressure happening on my head? And I was thinking, am I having a stroke or something? And I put my hands up, and then when I brought my hands down, I realized that both of my arms were covered in goosebumps. And I was standing there thinking, am I having a stroke? Should I sit on the couch? Should I call out for Victor? That's going to scare both the children. What should I do? And this big voice in my living room goes, I don't think that my son heard it or my daughter, whose room was next door. I think I just heard it. But it was this big voice that went, "You will have a scrapbook store." And I didn't have a retail store. I didn't scrapbook. Scrapbooking is wonderful stuff, but I didn't have time for it with 5 kids and working full time. There was no way. And so I looked up at the ceiling, and I went, "God, are you talking to me? Because I don't scrapbook and I don't know anything about running a retail store. So do you have the wrong house, wrong neighborhood?" And no answer. So I went running into where my husband was in the bedroom, and I said, "You'll never believe what just happened." And then I told him what happened. And he looks down at me and he goes, "I think that if you got that big of a message, you should see what it's going to take to get you there." And I looked at him, I said, "Are you kidding? We have 2 kids in college. We have another one heading there next year." I said, "We don't have funding for starting a retail store. I don't even want to do that. I want my job at the university." And I said, "That's impossible." And I looked back up at him, and his mouth was shut, and he was looking down at me. Then his mouth opened, and the voice from the living room spoke out of my husband's mouth. He didn't even know it was happening. He had no idea this was going on. And the voice said, "Barbara, you're the one that received the message." And I just went like this. My husband saw me, and I went, I was completely shocked. And I went and sat on the bed. I was shaking, and I was like, oh my gosh, And so then he went and fixed breakfast for the kids, and he took our youngest son to school. And I was late to my job at the university. I called my boss. When I got there in the morning, I sat there the whole time and I talked to God as I was doing my stuff. I was like, I don't know why you would tell me I need to do a scrapbook store. It's not in my league. I'm not, I don't know. But if you're going to want me to do this, you're going to have to like show me how to get there because I have no idea how. And so I got off work that day at noon. I had already arranged it with my boss. It was a Friday. And I got off work at noon. And so I went out to my car and I was driving down to our house in Santa Barbara down a little, we were about 15 miles away from the university. And I was stopped in front of this fire station at a stoplight. And inside my car, this other voice, kind of business-like voice goes, "You need to stop and ask about a business loan." And I'm like, oh my gosh, can you guys identify yourselves and tell me who's talking to me? Why are you telling me this? I don't even want to do this. Why are you doing this? So then the light changed and I went forward and my bank was literally 1 block further. So I only had a block to make like a decision. Should I go in and ask about a business loan? Should I just drive home? So I thought, well, okay, I'll go in. So I pulled into the bank, parked, went inside, asked this teller, who do I talk to about business loans? And she goes, oh, it's this guy over there. So she points him out and I go over and I introduced myself. And I said, I'm interested in a business loan. He goes, please sit down. And I said, okay. So he goes, how much? Oh, he goes, what do you want to use your business loan for? And I didn't want to say scrapbook store because I thought it sounded like goofy or something. And I said, I think I'm going to open up a paper art store. And the guy goes, okay. And he goes, how much do you want to borrow? And I'm sitting there thinking, I have no idea. And I looked at him, I said, I don't know. How much do you think it's going to take to open a paper art store? And his face just went. And he looked at me and he said, Mrs. Bartolome, you need to approach the bank when you have a business plan in hand. And I said, I'm really sorry I took your time today. I just begun thinking about this, and I will proceed and I'll come back later at another time. Thank you so much. And I start to walk away. And in the middle of the bank, it's a big giant area, the business-like voice goes, now wait a minute. You cannot give up that easily. You need to go back and ask someone else. And in my head, I went, you are not making this easy on me. You could show me who it is I'm supposed to talk to. And I said, I'm heading out that exit door right over there. And I'm going to go by those 4 offices that have the glass walls. If you want me to talk to somebody, you better show me who it is. And so I'm walking towards the exit door and I look at the first person through the glass wall and, they're busy, whatever. Look at the second person, look at the third person. And then when I look at the 4th person, I think I'm almost out the door. I'm almost done with this craziness. And the 4th person, he's writing something on his desk. And when I look at it, he literally goes, and I actually said, oh shit. I didn't want to talk to him. And I was like, no. So I went over to his door and I said, hi. And I introduced myself. And I said, I came in to talk about a business loan, but I realize now that I have to have a business plan. Do you know anything about them? Could you tell me, is it a software program that I need to buy to create one? Or is it a city college course that I need to take? How do you create a business plan? And he goes, could you have a few minutes? You want to sit down and I'll tell you about what it is and how to get it? I said, sure. So he goes, can I see your ID? And I said, sure. So he sat at his desk and he's looking at his computer and he's looking at my stuff, I guess, and looking at it. And he's talking about a business plan and what the aspects of it are. And after he does about 10 minutes of that, he goes, Mrs. Bartolome, could you hold on for just a second? I'll be right back. And I said, sure. He goes 2 cubicles down, talks to a lady. They're all glass walls, so I can see them. They're looking at her computer, maybe 4 minutes. And he comes back and he goes, I met him at the doorway. I stood up and, ready to go. Aren't we done yet? And he goes, Mrs. Bartolome, you've been approved for a $250,000 loan to start your scrapbook store. And I hadn't filled out anything. I was like, looked at him. I said, but what? I said, he goes, do you want to come in tomorrow and sign paperwork for that? And I said, do you mind if I call my husband? And I called my husband out of the university. We just had that discussion in the closet that morning. I said, Victor, I'm at the bank and they want to give me $250,000 to open up the scrapbook store. Are you interested in coming in tomorrow and signing paperwork for that? And he said, sure, what time? He never raised a question on it. We never discussed it. We literally got the loan the next day. And I built the store within 3 months and opened it. And 3 months after I opened the store, I was named Businesswoman of the Year for Santa Barbara, California, which is, a huge money area. And I don't know how that happened, but I had to give a talk in front of 400 business people and the mayor and the city council. And I was being awarded the award. And the night before, I was just scared to death. And I said to my husband, I've written this, just thank you very much for this award speech. And I've also written this epiphany story of how I got the whole idea to do this through, the other side. I'm really scared to talk about how I got it. And, the other side, I'm really scared to tell people that. And he said, my husband said, Barbara, I think that these things happen to you because you are brave enough to talk about them, which is a huge sentence in my life. And he's the first person who was like that in my life. And so that next morning when I got up to give my speech, I told them the whole story about the epiphany and getting the loan and opening the store. And I had an audience of 400 people who many of them were crying during my talk and got swarmed afterwards. And for years, people would stop me on the streets, didn't even know who they were. They might own a restaurant or some gift shop or something. And they would say, oh my gosh, you're the person who owns the scrapbook store. I saw you when you got your award. And oh my God, you touched my heart so amazingly. So giving that story away was a piece of promoting my ability to talk in front of others, and having that experience of that store and how positive it was in our community also helped build me up to where I could talk about my near-death experience without caring whether anybody believed me or not. And that's what it took, and that's what they gave me in my life to bring me to the point to where I am right now, so I can talk about it. And literally, yesterday I was walking through a maker's market that they have once a month, where people who hand make things have these little tables all set up. And I was walking through there, and a lady had a cute dog, and I petted her little dog. She had it up in her arms, up, on her shoulder. It was a really sweet little cutie. And I was petting her little dog and talking to her. And it turns into a story where she asks me what I do. And I say, well, I run a near-death experience group here in Santa Barbara. And she says, oh, I've been afraid of death forever. I'm so scared of death. And I said, well, let me tell you. And we talked for a half an hour. I told her my near-death experience story. I told her that she could call me after she saw the video on the documentary on YouTube. And I said, we can be friends and I can help you through this. And she said, I needed you. I don't know how you could have possibly known that by petting my dog. I've needed you for so long. And that's it. They put us together. The other side does it. It's not me looking for her. It's me saying, I'm open and I'm willing to talk about it. And then them saying, here's your person. Here's the dog you need to pet.
I think you're absolutely right about that. It's all about, as an individual, being open. And then when you're open, things, just instincts, ideas, intuitions, whatever it is, just comes. And if you just trust and follow, it's very interesting where it's going to take you. I just wanted to say something, because your experience in the car with Victor, where you had the sense that you've got to slow down, danger, big impact ahead, that kind of thing. I had something not in a car, something a little less dramatic, but dramatic for me at the time. I was living in London, and I was living in an apartment that was on the second floor. And upstairs was a gentleman who had an apartment but would rent it to different people. He wasn't the most careful of people, should we say, in terms of turning the gas off and this kind of thing. He just seemed a little bit sort of scatterbrained. I was at university, and it was the Easter break, and I remember being home at the time, and I walked the passageway, and I heard there was a short flight of stairs that led to his door, and I thought, that's odd. I hear a funny sound upstairs. That's very strange. So I thought, well, let me just investigate. It was in the middle of the day. So I walk up the stairs and his door wasn't closed, it was slightly ajar. And as I got a little bit closer, what I was hearing, and it was just peculiar and it didn't make any sense, was almost the sound of a cocktail party, as though people were chatting away, perhaps, clinking glasses, that kind of thing. And I just thought, well, this is very odd. It was in the middle of a work day at the Easter break. He wasn't somebody who was inclined to have cocktail parties. But I thought, this is really very strange. So I approached the front door that was ajar, and immediately I got, stop, do not touch that door. Do not push that door open. And it was stop, stop, stop. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, what the heck is going on, right? So I thought, okay, just back away, back away. So I went back down the stairs again. And then I went into my kitchen, and what was happening was that a frying pan had caught fire in his kitchen. Unbeknownst to him, there were 18-foot flames coming out of his kitchen window that were cracking the glass and breaking the glass. He had gone upstairs to have a nap. I think he'd gone to the pub to have a drink, was feeling very sleepy, forgot to turn the gas off, cook something. And that's actually what was happening. So at that point, some people downstairs and people next door noticed what was happening. I called the fire brigade. They came, they put out the flames. The fireman came up the stairs, knocked on my door and said, do you know if anybody is upstairs? And I happened to have heard a cough about half an hour earlier when I was sitting down just reading a book. Just below him, I heard a cough and I thought, oh, he must be upstairs. Forgot everything about it. But then when they asked me, do you think anybody's up there? Because these are gigantic flames. We need to know if we need to, step this up and try to save somebody's life. And he was upstairs. He had gone another floor up from where the fire was, and he closed the door and he was taking a nap. And that saved his life. Now, going back, thinking about this again, I'm thinking, oh my goodness. But the instinct I got after I thought about it was, if you push that door open, Angie, the oxygen, the air that's going to come into that room is going to bring those flames around into the stairwell. Very easily, you could be, burned, okay? And then it would spread very quickly throughout the rest of the building. So when you say, stop, danger, I actually experienced that myself.
Yeah.
And I was kind of second guessing myself, but I thought, no, it was so strong. And I thought, no, let me just pay some attention here. I'm just going to back off. And then within about a minute, I realized something was going on. There was some knocking on the door. I could hear some voices outside. Everybody was in a commotion because they could see these 18-foot flames coming out of the kitchen window. So I hear you. It happens.
Yep, it is.
Happens.
Yep, they want us to be, they want to interact with our life, and I think they're always around us. And they, I don't care what you call them. I don't care if you call them angels. I don't care what you call them. They don't care. They don't need to, have anything other than, I think, just that open door that you have, the connection to them, that they feel that they can talk with you, or they can make a change to something that's going to happen to you and help you. They feel open to do that.
And as you said, if you're open, you can be somebody's earth angel and help them out, just as perhaps you helped that gentleman who was in the wheelchair. And we just have a few more minutes, but I just hate to let Barbara go. But we do have just a few more minutes. I really do want to encourage our members, if anybody has a story where they feel that they've been warned against some danger, or they've been guided to help somebody in a difficult situation, please go ahead and share that with us. I would like to say one thing that happened to me, and this is one of my spiritual transformative experiences, and I'm going to make it very, very short. I was living in southeast Spain. I was in my early 20s at the time, and I was living there for about a year with my mom, and it was my job to go shopping, and everything was within walking distance, and you take a cart with you. You didn't have to drive anywhere. It was all right there. And I remember grabbing the cart, and I had a whole list, and I remember thinking, okay, I'm just going to go do what I need to do and then come home. Now, I was very heavily laden with kilos of fresh fruit and vegetables from the, you can imagine the Mediterranean. It was absolutely amazing. And I was pulling my cart back, and what I got was, do not go the usual way, go this way. Now, this was very hard. This was a very heavy cart. And the way I would go, I knew that there were ramps on the road, because the steps from the road from the sidewalk onto the road were quite steep. And if you've got a lot of tippity shopping, everything was going to fall over and roll down the road. So I would always go down a very specific path where I knew the ramps were. On this particular occasion, as I'm coming out of this large marketplace, hauling all of this, I get, don't go that way, go this way. And I'm thinking, that makes no sense. I have no idea if there are any ramps down there. I really don't want to go down there. Nope, go this way. Okay, so I go down this particular way. And as I'm walking down, now this is about 2:30 in the afternoon on the Saturday, when everything is starting to close down for the weekend. The shops are closing, the banks are closed, everything is closed. And I'm walking down, and you could see that the streets were beginning to thin out. It was a very hot summer. And so it was dinner, siesta time. And as I'm walking down, I am walking towards a couple. I see them on the street corner, and they're fair. They must have been, the age I am now, but at the time it seemed old because I was very, very young. But, they were, I guess, in their 50s, 40s, 50s. They looked like tourists. And I didn't know where they were from, but I knew they were from somewhere else. And the woman looked very distressed, and she walked up to a young man, and had tried to have a conversation. That didn't seem to go well, so she went back to where she was standing. I'm walking towards her. She comes to me very concerned, and she says, this is the middle of Spain, okay? She says to me, do you speak English? She's an American from Florida, southern Florida. It turns out that her husband was a pastor. They were on vacation in Madrid. They had come to Alicante, which is where I was, and they had been pickpocketed. And they had all of their money stolen. And all they had was an American Express card, which wasn't accepted widely in those days in Spain. And they had to get back to Madrid so they could catch their flight back to the United States. This was a Saturday, and he was a pastor in a big church, and he had to get back because he had a big speech, big something he had to do. And they were in distress. Saturday afternoon, they didn't know how to contact the American embassy. They were going to be stranded, penniless. That morning, I hadn't said this before, but I'll be very quick. This is one of the most extraordinary experiences I've had in my life. That morning, when I was getting ready to go shopping and help my mom out and do what we had to do, I had, take your savings book, take your bank savings book with you. And I thought, well, that's absurd, because there are pickpockets everywhere, especially in the summer because of all the tourists. The pickpockets are out in droves. I have no money to deposit, and I have no intention of taking money out of the bank. So why on earth would I take my bank deposit book with me? But it was no, take your bank deposit book. It's like a saving and loans. It wasn't a bank. Take it with you. And I thought, okay, I'll take it with me. So I put it in my pocket. Okay, now let's go to this lady. I say to her, what's wrong? She tells me her story. We're in a hurry because we could catch a train now, but if we don't catch the train now, we're going to miss the flight this afternoon from Madrid back to the United States, blah, blah, blah. And I had a sense of, I know I can trust this woman. I know this is all good. I said, what do you need? First of all, I was an English speaker. I said, do I speak English? I happen to be English. Oh my God. Okay, I said, what do you need? What do you need? She said, I need to borrow 4,000 pesetas, which in those days, which today might have been like $150. I said, okay, no problem. Guess what? I had my bank savings loan book with me, and it was still open. It would have closed in about 10 minutes. If I had had to go home to pick up the bank savings, it would have closed for the weekend. I went straight inside, 400 pesetas. She said to me, give me your name, give me your address. This is my name, this is my address. As soon as we get back to the United States, give me a couple of days so I know which way is up, and we will send you the money. I knew that this was completely legit. I handed over the 400 pesetas. Off they went, running to get the train. They got back to the United States, and within 3 weeks, she sent me a beautiful card with the money and a tip. because I had been their earth angel.
Oh.
Now, I didn't want to go down that particular road. I did not want to take my savings book with me, but I just listened and I helped these people who were in distress.
Yeah.
So I get it. I absolutely get it.
You know, that other question that she had about the fear of death that person posted brings up another story that I have too. I just want to say it really quick.
Raised hand. Yes, go ahead.
So I have absolutely no fear of facing the most dangerous situation. I have no fear whatsoever, and I proved it. So I had my third grade daughter when my little girl was third grade, and I had my older daughter, that's my husband's daughter, and they'd gone to a movie, and we got they had called me to come and pick them up. It was only 4 blocks from our house, so I came over to pick them up in front of the movie theater. And when I did, there was this young man who was like 19 years old that ran past the side of my van in the middle of the street. He was running down the middle of the street. Then I saw 4 more people running past me, and when I moved forward with my van, because the girls were inside, to the stoplight, I saw that those 4 guys had caught up to the one that was initially in front, and they'd captured him, and they had thrown him down on the sidewalk, and the 4 guys were kneeling, 2 on each side of him, and they were punching the heck out of him. Well, everybody that was walking by on the sidewalk wasn't reacting to the situation. They were not doing anything, which made me mad. So I pulled up level with them. So there was only one lane on the street that was between me and these guys were doing all this. And I stopped my car and put it in park. And I told the 2 girls to stay in the car. And I started to cross this one lane. And the guy that was stopped behind me said, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" And I said, "I'm going over to intervene in that situation. You can assist me." And he said, no, I'm not going to have anything to do with that. I'm not going to. So I went over and I literally grabbed the backs of their sweatshirts, one with each hand, and got behind, 2 of the boys on one side of the guy who was laying down. And I grabbed their sweatshirts and I just, in my biggest voice ever, meanest, scariest voice, I said, "Stop that right now." And the 2 guys who were on the opposite side that saw my face with the fury in it, they got scared, got up and started running. So the 2 guys I had the sweatshirt on got up and I let them go and they started running. But I was left with the guy laying on the ground that they'd been punching. So I helped him to stand up. He was 19 years old. And I said, "Are you going to be okay? Are you okay?" And he slowly looked down at his chest. And that's when I noticed these red dots that were all over his chest. They hadn't all been punching him. One of the 4 guys, it was a gang situation. They were being jumped into the gang. So they had to kill someone to be able to be allowed to be in the gang. And then one of those 4 guys was punching him with a sharpened screwdriver and puncturing over 30 holes in his chest. So I just took his arm and said, "Come with me." And I walked him across the lane to my car and put him in my passenger seat. And my daughters are in the back seat going. And I said, "Tell me what your name is." And he gave me his name. I said, "How old are you?" And I called 911 and I said, "I'm transporting a stabbing victim off of State Street in Santa Barbara. I need to let you know that the ETA for us to arrive at St. Francis Hospital is less than 5 minutes. And the person on the phone said, "You can't be transporting a stabbing victim because we already have a stabbing victim in the ambulance." And so I said, "If you have a stabbing victim in the ambulance and I have one sitting next to me in the front seat of my car, then there are 2 stabbing victims and perhaps you should let the hospital know that I'll be there in 4 minutes." And so I got there. He already had gone into shock, so he couldn't speak or talk. So I had his name and his age, and they put him on a gurney. They saved his life. They also saved the life of his 14-year-old cousin who'd been stabbed right in front of the movie theater. As I was getting the girls in the car, the gang had stabbed him once, and that distraction had then allowed them to chase down the 19-year-old, and they were going to kill him. And so he survived that incident, and I got, taken down to the location where the gang was caught at, and we were supposed to, identify them. And I hadn't really looked at their faces or memorized anything. I was intent on stopping the situation. It was my 3rd grade daughter who actually saw which of the 4 guys had the sharpened screwdriver in his hand, and she became the key witness to that attempted murder with gang enhancements. Now we get to the court 2 months later. They've had her on a secure situation at her school with a armed guard outside of her classroom for 2 months. She wasn't allowed to go to the bathroom or any place else unless she had the armed guard and another teacher walk with her. And so we get to the courthouse. I had all of her pretty strawberry blonde hair up underneath the big hat, and I had dark glasses on her so they wouldn't be able to recognize her. But I'm a redhead and I'm 5'9" and my husband's 7 feet tall. They're going to recognize us. I was pretty scared. Sitting with 6 police officers surrounding my husband and I and my daughter, with all of the gang members' families across the aisle staring at us and glaring at us because they knew we were going to testify against their sons. And I sat there again with the big prayers and said, God, please, I know you put me in that situation to have me do what I did. And I know that you'll get me out of this situation because you don't want us to have repercussions for this. I know that you'll help us. Thank you. And so after about sitting there 2 hours with these 6 officers surrounding us, the district attorney comes out of the courtroom, which we'd all been sitting outside of, and he walks over and he says, you're able to go. You're free to go. And I said, what? Why? And he said, well, I've never in my life heard of this ever happening or seen this happen. He said, but the guy that your daughter was going to identify pled guilty, which causes the other 3 to be guilty as well. And they're all going to end up going to prison for that situation. You don't even need to walk into the courtroom. You're free to go. We never had any repercussions. They never came and did anything to our home or our car or us or anything else. I for about 2 months, I was a little bit worried still, but nothing ever happened and we were fine. Nothing happened. So my kids were like, don't do that, Mom, don't do that. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. The reason why I'm here is to be put into a situation like that so that I can make a difference in that situation, because nobody else was doing that. And that 19-year-old's life would have been gone. And he didn't have anything to do with that gang. He was just somebody out there on the sidewalk that they decided to do it to. So I said, no, I'm here to be used as a helper. And that's why I'm here. And I encourage them all the time in my talks to the other side. I say, I'm here to be your heart, your hands, and your helper. You put me in the situations that you want me to be in, protect me through those situations, and I will do what you need me to do. That's my whole heart says that to them. So they know. That's why they put the little guy in the wheelchair to go by that day, because he needed a little angel and I'm their angel on earth. So I can do the stuff for them. So that's what I love being here for. And when they're ready to take me home, I'm ready to go home. I'm ready anytime.
Eva's been very patient. She's had her hand up for quite some time. Eva, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi.
Hi.
It's not a question that I want to say, but I'm inspired by everything you two said. And it reminded me of an experience that I had about 3 years ago. I was in an orthopedics office with my husband. And as we were waiting, a door opens and a young guy between 16 and 17 in an orange suit and shackles, along with 2 police officers, exited. And I thought, oh my God, I wonder what this guy did. And they stopped for a minute, at the reception area. And suddenly I hear this voice, you must say something to this guy. And I look around, I'm naturally a shy person. And I look around the office and it was packed. And I'm like, what am I going to say? No, I'm not going to stand up and say something to this guy in front of everybody. And so I just sat there. And within less than a minute, they walked in front of me and they exited. the voice became so much stronger in my chest. If you don't say something to this guy, you're going to regret it. And I just bolted out of the room. I didn't say anything to my husband, and it was just a matter of seconds. And I walked out the door, and they were waiting in front of the elevator along with maybe 10, 15 other people. And I had no idea what I was going to say. So I tapped the officer in the back and I said, can I say something to this guy? He's like, no, you can't talk to him. You can't touch him. You can't touch him. I'm like, I assure you, I'm not going to touch him. I just want to say something, knowing I had never, I didn't know what I was going to say. And so the guy heard by that time, and he looked at me, and I blurted out, I just want to tell you that you are so loved, and whatever happened to you, you're going to be okay. And his face softened, and he said, thank you so much for saying this. And I will never forget that. I don't know how I was put in that situation at that time. And I'm so glad that I went beyond my shyness and all that. And I went and talked to that guy. So that's all.
Well,
And when you have your life review, you're going to see how that moment touched his life and perhaps made a change.
Yeah, the
in his
ripple
life.
effects that would have had maybe on other people.
Exactly.
Basically.
Maybe those two police officers. Exactly. You
Yeah.
never know how, because you don't get to see, but you will see it at the end of your life. You'll see how that moment affected those people and how that was important for you to do in that moment. I'm glad you listened. I'm glad you felt that.
I think the other side was telling, I think for the other side, he absolutely had to hear that.
Yep.
Because he may have been absolutely at his wit's end and ready to sort of give up on everything.
Yeah.
And that might have given him the courage to face whatever it is that he was going through.
I mean, a young guy like that, a teenager, I could not possibly think what he had done, that he was shackled in his legs and his hands and everything, and accompanied by two policemen. So
And you never know what his situation was to make him do that. Perhaps it was a horribly abusive situation at home with, a parent or something, and he finally reacted to it, and now he's, shackled because he did something terrible to that parent. Instead of choosing to perhaps leave the situation, maybe he did something terrible. Maybe he stole something, who knows? But whatever it was that he did, he's going to have repercussions for it, but he needs to know that the love is absolute, no matter what you do, no matter who you are, no matter what you think. The love is absolute. And I felt that when I was out of my body, that absolute, incredible love is there, no matter who you are or what you've done or what you choose to do. It's acceptance. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we have run well over the hour, but I think this has been an absolutely gorgeous, amazing, heartwarming presentation. I love you so much, Barbara.
Thank you. I love you too, Angie.
So
I can't wait to come out for the conference and see you guys. So let's do it when we come next year.
Well, yes, it's in Arlington next year, and
yes,
I'm going to be called on, I'm sure, and maybe some of our members will help volunteer just to make it an amazing event. But this is the kind of presentation that for me is so incredibly uplifting. It gives hope, there's grace, and it actually makes life kind of a little bit more bearable. So I want to say thank you so very, very much for your wonderful time, beautiful presentation, and your amazing love that comes over the waves in such a strong way. You are truly an absolute angel and a gift to humanity. Thank you.
it's just coming through me, guys. It's coming from above, home. So they're sending it through me. So I'm just the tool. But thank you, Angie. I just can't wait to come out there and hug all of you guys when I get out there. So I'll bring my 7-foot tall guy and you guys can take a lot of pictures of them. If I had $1 for every time everybody in the world has asked him, how tall are you? Did you play basketball? I'd be really super rich, but he's just a really fun, nice, gentle guy. So I can't wait for you all to meet him. we'll come out there next year and we'll see you all. Okay.
Okay. All right. God bless. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody. Enjoy
Feel
the
free
rest
to
of
call
the
me,
day.
you guys, and talk to Angie. She's got my number. I'll talk
Okay.
to anybody. I love you guys.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.